Hello everyone and welcome to today's event. Thank you very much for joining us at the Trinity Centre for Literary and Cultural Translation. And we're very pleased to be joined today by Misha Hoekstra, who will be reading from and discussing his latest translation from Danish of New Passengers by Tine Høeg, with Jordan Barger, based in Philadelphia. Jordan's a translator working from Norwegian and French, and I'm sorry for murdering every single one of those names there. So I'll pass it to our speakers just now. Thanks so much.
Thanks, James. It's totally all right. I think I'm used to it at this point. But yeah, hi everyone. So my name's Jordan. I'll be talking with Misha today. Wanted to start out by just saying that there's the two main topics of today that we're going to be talking about are translation as practice and the joys of it, and secondly, this book, New Passengers by Tine Høeg. New Passengers is a new book from Lolly Editions. I have quite a couple of their books now. Lolly Editions got my attention, and a lot of people's attention with their book Tools for Extinction earlier this year. This was the first bit of COVID writing that I thought was very legitimate, really nice. A lot of contemporary European writers, and everything they've been doing since has been really lovely. This one has got, New Passengers has gotten my attention because I've been working in Danish recently, which is how I've met Misha. Misha's a pretty well-established Danish translator. Yeah. We're going to be talking about ourselves a little bit later, but like James mentioned, I started in language studies with French, worked in France in five-star hotels as a receptionist, then worked and lived in Norway, and now I'm in Philadelphia and dipping into Danish because the two languages are pretty similar. Yeah, like I said, I'll be talking to Misha about his background. So I'm going to pass on to Misha, who's going to read a little bit of the beginning, both in Danish and English.
And when you say I'm a Danish translator, that means I translate from Danish.
Right.
And I'm actually American, as everybody can probably hear right away. So I hope that you folks over in Ireland can understand what we're saying.
Yeah, both of us. They put the two Americans together for this one.
Yeah. Well, at least we can understand each other.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start just by read the first page in Danish from Tina's book, which is called New Passengers in Danish, and it came out in 2017. And I think some of you have probably read the first chapter in translation, which was available through the link. So this is the first page, and then I'll read the first couple of pages in English. Jeg har købt et pendlerkort. Jeg har fået et nyt navn, et lærernavn, sat sammen af bogstaver fra mit for- og efternavn. Jeg har fået koden til gymnasiets netværk, der ændres hvert halvår efter princippet sommer 16, vinter 16, sommer 17, vinter 17. Jeg er blevet sat ind i systemerne. Det er tilfældigt, at vi falder i snak i toget på min første skoledag. Jeg er så nervøs, og vores ben rører ved hinanden, da vi sætter os. Du er grafiker på et rejsebureau. Du er også pendler. Du er 10 år ældre end mig. Du er gift og far til en pige. And now in the American. And this, I don't know if you can see, but the book has this really nice glittery, shiny strip. Yeah, I'm not sure why you're on. Can people see me? Okay, I'm just seeing you, Jordan. So it's got this shiny strip because the title refers to new passengers in Danish. When a conductor comes walking down the aisle of a train and asks for people with tickets, they say, new rejsende, new passengers, new passengers. And so this is supposed to mimic the little weird computer code that they scan on the bottom of the tickets. I've bought a monthly pass. I've been assigned a new name, a teacher's name, comprised of 4 letters from my first and last names. I've been given the code to the high school network, which is changed every 6 months according to the principal. Summer 16, winter 16, summer 17, winter 17. I've been briefed on the systems. It's by chance we fall to talking on the train, my first day of teaching. I'm nervous and our legs graze each other when we sit down. You're a graphic designer at a travel agency. You're a commuter too. You're 10 years older than me. You're married and father to a girl. I look at my reflection in a store window at Copenhagen Central Station on Tuesday. I buy 2 cups of coffee and position myself on the escalator. Turns out you've done the same thing. We board with the cups. I donate mine to 2 teenagers who sit leaning up against each other, looking tired. They're happy and surprised. Blood in my body, a thrumming in my ears when the train starts to move. The first time I see you naked, train toilet, someplace between Copenhagen and Næstved. I've never wanted someone this way before. So those were the first 3 entries. The book's divided up into 5 sections that are named after the months and proceeds relatively chronologically.
Yeah, I want to say a little bit about the book before we continue. Is that the most striking thing about this book is that New Passenger is a novel in verse, which is something we're going to be talking about a lot, and we'll show some examples later. That sets the tone for a lot of the book. The book is very lean, terse. It's really lovely, very engaging, and yeah. So it's about the perils of being a new adult. You know, feeling unqualified for the things you're doing, where everyone else around you seems to know what they're doing. That internal panic that we all experience, but have a hard time sharing. And Tina's got a great voice and being able to share that. So yeah, I just want to throw down those kind of tenets before we move on. So, you know, this event is very much set up to be as a conversation between me and Misha. And one thing I really wanted to share in doing that is just that for me, the joy of translating, the process and the craft itself is really wonderful. But you build up all of this energy that you have to share with people. And the second half of the fantastic bit of translating is sharing it with other people, but also meeting other translators. This craft can be a bit lonely at times. It can take a lot of work. It can take long nights. And like I said, you're building it up. You know, language wants to be gathered like a coil, and excitement is like that too. So I know Misha okay. We've ran across each other, but only in digital ways. So I wanted to kind of go through what I normally go through when I meet translators, because I love it. I get really excited when I meet another translator. So, but I'm going to blend that with this being a public event, you know. So we're going to go into that. So yeah. So there are a lot of different Englishes. We're in a world with, you know, English is a very global language, and there is the global English, there is American, there is British English. So I wanted to ask you, Misha, what informs your English? What is your background in it? What interests you in it?
Sure.
Specifically just in English.
Sure. So I grew up in the American Midwest in a Christian suburb of Chicago, and lived there until I was 18. Never saw the ocean until I was 14, which is probably hard for most people in Denmark and most people in Ireland to understand. And then I went to a series of schools. I spent a year at MIT. I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. Went to a tiny little men's college out in the California desert called Deep Springs, near Death Valley for 2 years. And it was there that I really started indulging my love of language, and started thinking about becoming a writer. I finished.
There's always that period of wanting to be a writer with the translator, where you're like, because you have to. I mean, it is writing. It's very much is writing. So
it is writing.
Every translator has that little.
It's rewriting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have the structure. You have the basic facts in each sentence often, but you give them voice in your own language.
Yeah, I think when you delve deep enough into one, world or art, there's a point where you want to participate, and I think that's one of the best parts of the 21st century with the tools and technology we have, is we're finding ways where everyone can plug in and contribute, and I think translation is such a good avenue for that. Music was like that for me, and I know you're a musician too, Misha, is that I listened to music forever, cataloged it, archived it, and just thought about it all the time, wrote about it until I was like, I could do this. I'm going to make music.
Sure.
And translation has been that for me with my love of language and writing. I love that you also so I studied industrial design in college with a French minor, but then eventually switched to French as my major and gave up on the industrial design. It was not a good fit for me, but there was also something similar there. And I was interested in structure and how that allows aesthetics to work and allows art to exist. Like, does any of that blend together with you in engineering and grammar? Is that a huge?
Well, somewhat. Yeah, I mean, so my background, after Deep Springs, I went on and I got 2 degrees in creative writing, one in poetry and one in fiction. So yeah, I do think that there is, with translation, you're given a structure. And so it's, I like to say that you're given the armature of a sculpture, and that you have to put the plaster or whatever, and you give the final expression, the texture in your own language, and you make it your own, but you're given this armature to start with.
That's so good. I'm taking notes at our own event. This is so good. Armature, that's so good. Yeah.
And so I've been living in Denmark for a little more than 20 years.
Oh, okay. So
get back to the United States a lot, and I work every day in English, American English, but I will say that my conversational American is probably, it's stuck back 20 years. I do see family on vacation when there's not a pandemic raging.
Right. No, that's great. I appreciate that. I only my only thing to add there is just like with me, language studies really brought me back to my not mother tongue, but mother English. I'm from the American South. I'm from the Appalachians, and I went to Appalachian State and studied French as a way to escape this, Southern accent, which I now love. Like I really embrace it. And and celebrate it. But I abhorred it when I was little. Like I didn't want to speak like all the people around me, and I just had to get out. But anyway, so yeah, so our second question is Danish. What informs your Danish, your background and inspirations there? I mean, you lived there 20 years, and your family is Danish. Where is the connection?
Well, I've got two daughters here, a Danish ex-wife, and but when you raise kids, if you want to raise them to be bilingual, you speak to them in your native tongue. So I've always spoken English to them. Okay. But I've had increasingly to deal with Danish. In the beginning, especially in the beginning, I had much more written sense of the language, because Danes are very good at speaking English. And if you are a foreigner and you start trying out your new Danish skills on them, they often answer you in English.
Yeah, it can be such a challenge. I mean, Norwegians are like that too.
It's obviously a blessing in most ways, but if you want to just, learn Danish. But right now I live in a collective out in the country with 25 other people. And so I have regular interactions with them, and I run a local songwriting group. And so all our activities are in Danish. So even though I spend my days in English or translating from written Danish to English, I do have a fairly active Danish voice in my head.
Yeah, no, it's so good. Yeah, then thirdly, translation. I mean, like I was saying, when I meet other translators, I love to know about their source language, their target language, and then just how you even get started. I think everyone has a different sort of spark story, ranging from the being hired for commercial translation all the way to the like, the world needs to know about this book, and that takes you on this whole journey, and a million things in between. So, but what about you?
So I was doing commercial translation at first because I needed money, and I was finishing a novel that I was writing myself and working on that, but I wasn't really focused on Danish literature. And then I was contacted by a Danish author, Christian Jungersen, who's probably best known for The Exception. And I've done a couple books for him. So in the beginning, we just had to converse by English because my spoken Danish especially was not very good. But I found that if you're interested in translation, the most important thing is that your target language, in this case, English, is good, that you can write convincingly and fluidly and make something sing. And then smaller mistakes are, mistakes in translation, they're less important than that there's an experience that the reader gets. And especially, it's a blessing and a curse translating to English, because the blessing is that authors can always weigh in on whether you've made a mistake, or they always have opinions on how their things should sound in English. But obviously that's a curse, because they have a lot of opinions, and there can be a lot more back and forth. If I were translating from Danish to Japanese, I would never get any author queries. It would be simple, and then there would be a lot more mistakes. So it would be faster. But I think my translation and my translation practice and my Danish has improved immensely, because I've been able to do collaborations with living authors that really care a lot about the language.
Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, every language pair has its blessings and curses, and that's I love hearing about all of them. That's really good. Cool. Misha, is there anything you want to add before we start looking at the text itself?
Let's go into the text.
Sweet. So, like I was saying, New Passengers is a novel in verse, and I think seeing it is really important. It's a really lovely object and product because of just picking it up. It's very engaging. Yeah, I'm just going to get right to it. So I'm going to share my screen here and just show you what I'm talking about. So, you know, what we mean in layman's terms for a novel in verse is that the book is in short little lines. Like, it looks a bit like poetry, but is very much prose and is very much a novel. There are some poetic devices used here in our verse, specifically in jammed lines. Sometimes the line is a full sentence, other times not. And this is a really lovely book to talk about with translation students and in this context, because it has really specific challenges of both prose and poetry. Poetry is poetry translation is, like, you know, often joked about as impossible, but you know, a lovely pursuit. And one of the things is that poetry never looks the same, or you might have to throw something out like rhymes or structure. And so you have, yeah, like you were saying, the armature and the structure. So I wanted to start with this one because we have a few of these lines where you have, like, the overall structure is kept, where you have the first few lines are there, and it comes down together, and it's very visual both in content and in structure. Yeah, so Misha, in a general sense, what is translating something like this that has a typographical constraint and a visual element different from other things?
So in this case, this translation right here is very direct. It just worked out that way. There were some constraints. As you can see, it doesn't rhyme in the Danish, doesn't rhyme in the English, and there's no regular meter. Most of the stanzas are 1 or 2 lines, sometimes 3. It was important for the author to make sure that every line, none of the lines wrapped around. And usually that wasn't a problem, but sometimes there are things in Danish that require a lot more words in English. And there I had to truncate things or include things in other lines just so it would have the same visual appearance.
What do you mean wrap around, in the sense like that?
Wrap around, so you have a line that goes, you have a poetic line that goes on more than one line. It wraps around. Usually it's shown by being indented in the second line. There's no wraparounds in this book.
Gotcha.
Either the Danish or the English.
On your first pass through with this book or any page or anything, did you find yourself in a prose mindset or a poetry mindset? Because you were just saying things about meter and line and stanza, but
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a music to the Danish, and one of the things that really took me with this book when I first looked at it is it was very easy for me to hear it in my Midwestern voice. And so I didn't really think about it as prose that will then be put in lines or anything like that. I just translated it straight. There were individual challenges that really hung me up along the way, but they usually had to do more with either language or with communicating things about Danish culture that people in Denmark, it feels like every day, but in the United States or England or Ireland, it feels like it's a different planet, and you can't just refer to them in a word or two.
Yeah, no, totally. There's like cultural connections there.
So for example, one that I've talked about before is there's a Danish sport called håndbold, and there's just one scene where they're playing this sport, and it's a bit like rounders if you're in England. I did an American translation though, so I was just trying to find an equivalent that would give readers a quick understanding of the scene, and they could see that there were some different rules. They could infer those rules, but they wouldn't be hung up, and I wasn't becoming an encyclopedia by adding all these lines explaining what this sport was. So in the English, it became Danish softball.
Mm-hmm.
So that let people get an idea that it's similar to American baseball, particularly softball, but it's got its own rules. And
yeah, that's a really smooth choice because it lets the reader keep going, but if they're interested enough, they can still investigate from there. And I think it's okay to leave people some breadcrumbs, but not spend time like telling them what it is, because we live, we definitely, for years we've said, readers have dictionaries, and now readers have the internet, and I'll come across older translations that I feel like miss things. I was going through some like Transtromer translations, and they left out this really beautiful symbol of a really specific fossil that's shaped like a microphone. It's like a Cold War poem about microphones in the wall, and they translated it as trilobite in one and ammonite in the other, because they didn't want to bog someone down. But it's the last line, and it's a really important thing to leave it behind. But something like Danish softball, you can keep moving. You can see the scene of them playing a sport that's somewhat familiar to you. But if you're really if you're really into it, you can find it from there. And I think that's really nice, because we are guides for people as translators. So this next slide. Yeah. So this scene is also really visual, and there's a lot of action pretty quickly. And I wanted to ask you about, with this section, is it difficult to work with the verbal economy you're given here? Because this scene, this one especially, like every single word is very important. All of the pronouns are in place, and the places, the actions, the setting. It doesn't seem like there's much room to wiggle with a scene like this in Danish.
No, I would say the one place where there was room to wriggle is the last word.
Mm.
It look as just like a start or a yank but I like to use the word jerk here. It doesn't have the double meaning in Danish, but there are other places where there are double meanings. So the guy, the author or the protagonist is talking about here, he's being a jerk. So
yeah.
So it was a nice way to just round off that passage. But
yeah, this is why translators spend like days on one word, because if you use the wrong word here, it could be repulsion, it could be a lot of different things. But part of him being a jerk, part of him pulling away, is him realizing that he's married, realizing that he shouldn't be doing what he's doing. And it's not just like because he is still very interested in her, clearly.
Yeah. But the rest here, I think, is pretty straightforward, and it worked well to translate it directly. But yeah, you have to find things that still have some music in English, and move your little Legos around.
So moving on, this one's a little bit longer. So we don't have to go through it word for word or line by line, but this is a section that is during Danish class. Our protagonist is a Danish teacher, which brings up a lot of things, because there's a lot of Danish class scenes, and where the subject has to be made, the actual subject of the class has to be made sense of and brought along, which I think was good. There was a lot of examples, like of what they were talking about in the class, that I looked up and was interested in. But this scene in particular is she's going through grammatical and mathematical, you say, like sayings or adages or memorization.
So there's a grammatical distinction, and she's suggesting, and then one of the students suggests a mnemonic to remember the distinction. Here, I was really lucky because if you see over in the Danish, it says lægge and ligge. Those two verbs, they're irregular verbs, and they correspond almost exactly to lay and lie in English. And so we already have, I was able to say the chicken lays an egg. You say the same thing in Danish, and the egg lies in the nest. It's the exact same thing. So it made my life simple, and then I just used a regular mnemonic, not exactly the same. She uses so she's drawing a correspondence in the mnemonic, or Noah is between the sound and another word, and I was able to do the same thing in English. To lay is to place, to lie is to recline.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, because there's across language, but we still share, singing, and it's something sort of universal in education.
Yeah, so I would say, to give you an example of a place where because she is a Danish teacher, there are a lot of things about language in here, and language and jokes, language grammatical explanations and jokes are some of the hardest things to translate, because they have to do with the nitty-gritty texture of individual languages. So one thing that was difficult was where she was making a slide to do another kind of mnemonic for her kids, where there were two usages of a word that kids often mixed up, and one of them could also be, the word also meant nut, and so she made a PowerPoint where the nut is crossed out. And to be literal about that, or to try to explain that, would take an entire page in English. So I went through and I looked at, I did different Google searches on common grammatical errors, especially for high school students, and looked at several hundred of them, and looked for something that would be comparable, that would lend itself to a little PowerPoint slide. And it was with fleshing out an argument. You don't flush out an argument, you flesh it out. You don't flush it out, you flesh it out. And a PowerPoint with a toilet with a being crossed out.
There you go. Yeah, because sometimes the translator's tool is you just replace something. I bet Simon's in the Chinese kicking me, because we learned this one together. But you have the opportunity there, and it doesn't have to be one for one. It just has to be something comparable. And the only thing I want to point out with this text is just at the end of this one, I start laughing on my desk. Why is that funny? Asked Sandra. It's just, that's something that's so good about this book, just as as a book, as a novel, is that every scene blends into another one. As you're in one scene, something else starts to happen and it keeps moving on to something else. And the pace of this book really was really astounding to me, because it is dense, but it keeps you going. It's with little devices like that. It's really nice. Our fourth and last slide, I'm not going to spend too much time on, but I did want to show it because this is what was the core of me being interested in the process of translating this book. Because you have a couple generally difficult things when going from Danish or Norwegian into English, which is the compound words. When I see a compound word, as a predominantly English speaker in that language, I always stop. I say, this never means what I think it is. I'm going to look this up. And you have, in this section, you have compound words that are jokes. This teacher is talking to parents and he makes jokes off of compound words. And I noticed that in both texts, and that's when I was like, I just wanted to know about the process of this book. This is what sparked my whole curiosity. It might not be an amazing scene, but I don't know. It struck me.
Right. Again, they seemed like things that were fairly, translation seemed pretty straightforward. Opgave oasen, an assignment, oasis is direct and it's understandable. You might not, I don't know if anybody anywhere calls something an assignment oasis, but it makes sense immediately to us in English. Lektia fengslet is a homework jail, homework prison. I thought dungeon would be better because it's somewhere where people are cast. It's more fairy tale like.
Yeah, like I said, not everything in translation is a 20-hour ordeal.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so surprising and so rewarding as a craft, is that you always have to check yourself. If you go through something too smoothly, a good translator questions that. They're like, was that really that easy? Do we go back to it?
Right.
And sometimes you spend, if I were translating this book, those would have stopped me and I might have overthought it. I might have, yeah.
Well, then there's another one there, I folkamuna, in the people's mouth. So that, I just more colloquially.
Yeah.
Then he can use one of his teacher fine words.
That's so good. Yeah. So no, thanks for going through with me with that. It can be a challenge to revisit something you've worked on and to dig into it with other people. It can be it's not to put pressure on you. It's just to dig into the joys of the text. That's what I really love. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that we have time for one last reading and questions. And before that, I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that I think are really amazing about this book. I definitely put this book as literary fiction. It's something that's really engaging and it's really lovely. You pick it up and it's pleasant and it's inviting, and then it's novel in verse. The subject matter is really nice and engaging and keeps you entertained. But there are two elements of this book that I think make it really special, something like lasting. Because for me, it was something literary, whatever that means. But for me, it means something worth keeping, worth sharing. And the two things in this book is, one, there's this friction and this tension between her curiosity and her deviancy. And that I absolutely love, that the more that she goes into her relationship with this married man, the more she starts to understand married life and having a child through the lens of not destroying it, as she's breaking something apart. It's like a mechanical pencil. You take the pieces apart to understand it so that you can put it back together. And she's questioning that herself. She's wondering if she's enjoying the illicitness of it, or is she understanding it? And there's this empathy that builds up with the wife and the child, and these dream sequences where she changes places with them. That's really, really special. I think that makes it a really, an important work. And then the second bit is the way that her anxieties in the first half of the book start to manifest as physical symbols. They become things around her, either as barriers or marks, like things to remember them. There's a few really nice symbols as the book goes on, one of which we're going to mention in this last one. But the three that really struck me is that there's strollers start to become this barrier. If you've ever seen police use their bikes as a barrier, I've been seeing that a lot in America this year. Policemen will use their bikes as a big barrier to keep people out. Strollers start to become that for her. There's this barbed wire scar that she gets, and there's some sort of wedding where she feels like Judas. There's all of these, the way she carries her anxieties through the book, and you see them transform it, I think makes this book of merit. It's a really great book. Yeah. Thanks for listening to me. Misha, would you be interested in reading one last thing to?
Yeah. Should we take I can see there's at least one question.
Sure.
From Sandra. And she was wondering if, because there was a German translation, whether I was in contact with the German translator at all about our particular solutions for it. And the answer is no.
Does that sort of thing interest you?
And I never saw the German translation. I haven't seen it. And it's possible the German translator saw what I did, which is fine.
Does that sort of thing interest you to ever like triangulate problems, or does that just?
Yeah, I've done it a bit with the novel by Jordan Norse, Mirror Shoulder Signal, because it's been translated in many languages. So there were, and because Dorda worked with me at length, getting the language and getting things just right in the English, and the translators to the other 20 languages did not have that advantage. So she gave them my email address, and so they were able to contact me, and in some cases did, but otherwise they were also able to use the English as sort of a crib, just because most people do understand English.
Sure. I mean, a bunch of translators working on the same thing in different languages. I mean, there becomes like this. It starts to multiply. It almost feedback. There's so many. You could dig so deep into something and making sure that it's perfect in every language that it would take forever. You could open a monastery of just like, here's 20 translators working on one book, making sure it's perfect. But that's part of that.
Actually is a scene in Mirror Shoulder Signal.
All right. No.
A Swedish crime novelist gathers his translators together from around Europe and holds forth and has this seminar. He's sort of a macho.
That's ridiculous. I like
noir.
It's like Fellini stuff.
And I think it's probably
in
real life.
Because part of a translation that that is, because it's a literary thing, is that we have to decide, just for our human limitations, like, what are we going to translate? What is worth translating? We can't translate everything. We can't have that glorious, like, when something like the Harry Potter or the Bible gets translated, you can bring in everyone. But with resources and just time constraints, human constraints, we have to decide what can we do. We have a couple others here.
Yes.
Anna Maria asks, she says she's enjoying the conversation, thank you. Just wondering if the poetic structure of the novel adds to the subject. Does it work better as a long poem? If so, how and why?
I would say that the structure is integral to what the book is. And so one of the things we haven't really addressed is how these short lines work, because they lack punctuation, so they lack often attribution. So if somebody's speaking, it often doesn't say that somebody's speaking. You have to infer it from what they say, that this is who has said these few words.
Right.
And often the experience when you're reading through it in the Danish, and I believe in the English too, is that you get misdirected because you've read one line and you think the next line is also spoken in, say, the narrator's voice, when it turns out one of the students has said it, and you don't realize that until maybe you're a couple of lines down. And so you have to do some rereading and identify for yourself the different kinds of voices in here. And there's this ambiguity and this sort of overlap between texts that really, I think it's really important part of the book, that she feels herself often confused and has a hard time parsing her surroundings. Yeah. And you can it's very well orchestrated in the Danish, certainly, that you can actually figure out who is saying things. So it's a bit of a puzzle, and then you feel really smart when you've done that. But and I've tried to make it comparable in the English. It's the enjambment of sense is a little different in the English, because sometimes the structure of a line or a sentence, it's flipped in terms of word order, or there's different resonances between words. But it was something that I worked a lot on, and also worked a lot on with the editor from Lolly, Denise Rose Hansen, who's really helpful. And she's has the advantage of being a native Danish speaker, and very good at English. So
yeah, thanks.
Another blessing / curse.
The last little thing in the chat is from Charlie. Hi, Charlie. Good to see you in here. She's just recommending that that you submit a reading to their lovely Translators Aloud channel. It's really lovely.
Can do. I think we're actually about out of time, so if I could just read a few more minutes, and we can round it off.
Sounds good.
So, I shake the teacher's hand. This is page 187, if you happen to have the book. I shake the teacher's hand. It's my first time picking her up, I say. Evie's sitting in the room with the other kids on small red chairs. They're eating oranges and crackers with herring pate. Cardboard hearts and stars dangle from the ceiling. I squat down next to her. Hi, Evie. Would you like to go home with me to Daddy? She puts her cracker down. What's that on your forehead? She points to the barbed wire scar. It's nothing. She brushes my bang to the side and cocks her head. Does it hurt? No, I say, and turn my face away. She takes hold of my head and turns it. Close your eyes, she says. Then she blows on my face. Her breath is warm. It smells of herring pate. She blows and blows. The scar prickles. Then it gets warm. The heat runs up across my head, down my neck, along my spine, and spreads to my entire body. Evie lets go of my head. There, she says. I open my eyes, feel with my fingers. The skin of my forehead's completely smooth. She leans in toward me and kisses me on the mouth. The other kids clap and whoop. Evie crawls up on her chair. She raises her arms in the air. The sunlight falls through the window and sets fire to the glasses. The orange peels glow orange. The children join hands and start to sing. Evie tilts her head back and shuts her eyes. Her feet rise. The children's voices rise, and she floats among the Christmas decorations, higher and higher. I think actually, because we're out of time, that I'm just going to end right there.
It's a great place to end.
Thanks so much, Jordan.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thank
Trinity.
You. Yeah, Trinity. Thank you all for hosting.
Well, thank you. It's been a really, really interesting discussion, and I've enjoyed it so much, and I've also learned a lot through the process. So I hope you'll accept our invitation to come back again and speak to us in the future. For those of you listening, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you'll join us for more events. We regularly hold translation-based events here at the centre. Most of them are online. Well, in fact, all of them are online just now. And we also have a YouTube channel where you can catch up on any that you may have missed. And for those of you who are really keen on literary translation, we now have a friends scheme where you can get even closer to the centre and get all sorts of different perks associated with that. So I do hope you'll check out the link that you can see on your screen just now. And whether you do or not, we'll look forward to seeing you in an event very soon. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.